Good morning, Dayanita, Jenia, and all of you in the US. Hello to everyone out there around the globe. This is a very interesting platform, expansive, and it reaches out um, to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to see this lecture. So I think we're fortunate to be able to bring people internationally to this lecture. And thank you to all of you. 150 people registered for this event. I don't know how many people total, but we have many, many people who registered who are here for this event. So thank you. My name is Jeffrey Berliner. I am the executive director at Penumbra Foundation. For all of you who don't know much about us, we are a nonprofit photographic organization based in New York City, dedicated to photography from its 19th century invention to the present. I would like to mention that we are still accepting applications for our 2021 Workspace Residency Program. The deadline is February 15th. I urge anybody interested in this program who are interested in furthering their work and doing it at Penumbra or not necessarily at Penumbra, depending on the situation, to register. And the deadline is February 15th, which gives you a little bit of time. So please, I believe it is free to register to enroll in this program. I would like to say that we are offering more than 30 online classes from personal vision and photo book editing to lens webinars and historical processes. Some of those are actually in-house. So there's online and in-person. The workshops in person are limited to 5 people because of the pandemic, but take a look at our offerings. We are also running our first ever print sale, offering fantastic open edition works donated by outstanding artists to support our 2021 programs. So please, to learn more about everything we do, I invite you to visit our website, penumbrafoundation.org. We would like to thank our sponsors, our members, the artistic community, and Penumbra board members for their constant support and generosity. This talk is part of the Penumbra Artist Series, and due to COVID-19, we will continue to host these events online until we can get together again. However, with the international audience that we've created for this event and events like it, we will continue to have online lectures as well. Today, we have artist Dayanita Singh joining us and Jenia Fridlyand, and thank you both for agreeing to do this. And Dayanita, thank you for bringing your work to our community. I'm sure it's going to be an enjoyable event. Dayanita Singh, born 1961 in India, uses photography to reflect and expand on the ways in which we relate to photographic images. Her recent work, drawn from her extensive photographic oeuvre, are a series of mobile museums that allow her images to be endlessly edited, sequenced, archived, and displayed. Stemming from Singh's interest in the archive, the museums present her photographs as interconnected bodies of work that are replete with both poetic and narrative possibilities. Publishing is also a significant part of the artist's practice. In her books, often published without text, Singh extends her experiments on alternate forms of producing and viewing photographs. Jenia Fridlyand, born 1975 in Moscow, is a photographer and educator based in New York City and the Hudson Valley. Her photographs and books have been exhibited in the United States and abroad. She is represented by Gallery Wouter van Leeuwen. She has been teaching photo book courses at Penumbra Foundation since 2018 and is the chair of our year-long program, the photo book from start to finish, which has been a very popular and successful program. And so thank you, Jenia, for that. I would like to thank Dayanita Singh for accepting the invitation and joining us to share her work and ideas. So thank you all again, and I'm going to hand it over now to Dayanita and Jenia. And everybody, please enjoy the lecture.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Dayanita, would you like to start with the presentation, or I would like to maybe ask you a quick question before relating to your biography, because I was curious, you know, is there kind of a biographical fact that shaped, you know, your interests and focus as an artist as you are now? You know, something that happened in your life that kind of turned you in that direction.
In the direction of what? In the direction of photography?
Well, but you're not just a photographer, right?
Exactly.
I would say that you're, as an artist, you're interested in pushing the boundaries of definitions, right? So maybe right. So I was wondering if there's something in your life that happened that kind of, defined that as your path.
I only became a photographer to be free. It wasn't love of the medium. It was just one night because I had got, I wasn't allowed to photograph at a concert, and I thought I would just photograph someone for the class assignment that we had. And so when I was asked to not take the photographs, and I was waiting outside for this fantastic tabla player, Zakir Hussain, to come out. And when he came out, I put my hands on my hips, and I was so angry because I'd been pushed and I fell, So in front of a whole hall full of people, 18 years old, it was a very embarrassing situation. So I stood there and I said, Mr. Hussain, I'm a young student today. Someday I'll be an important photographer, and then we'll see. And burst into tears. And that night I sat with a group of friends, and we sort of decided that, if I wanted to, there were no women in photography that I knew at that time in India. So it was like, do you think I can just become a photographer? And I did. And I think that's my relationship to photography, other than being photographed extensively by my mother since I was her firstborn. So the last thing I wanted was to be a photographer. And yet, at the age of 18, to realize this medium can set me free. I don't have to get married, I don't have to have children. I don't have to do anything that society would like me to do because I'm a photographer. And fortunately for me, everybody around was so gullible that they believed me and said, oh, poor thing, she can't get married, she can't have children, and I could be free to do what I liked. So that was, and I think that's where the plotting also started, that I can do what I want with photography. I don't have to toe the line of any institution or group or nothing. I could do what I wanted with it. And I think that's what I've done. And I'll share that with you right now.
All right, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Well, thank you to the Penumbra Foundation for inviting me. And Jenia, thank you so much for being in conversation, because it would be terrible to have to do this on one's own.
My pleasure.
Well, since we decided, first when Leandro said, would you do a presentation? And I said, absolutely not, because I find Zoom presentations, especially when they're PowerPoints, terribly boring. And I feel like, just send me your PowerPoint. Why do I have to stay up till this time of the night to see your PowerPoint? So I'm going to try something today. And at first I thought, can I sum up my life's work in 3 images? And I think I found 3 images that run you through 40 years of my work. And this is the first one, which is on my screen. And this is 40 years ago at the National Institute of Design with my wonderful roommate, Yamuna. She probably took this picture. Someone took it with my camera. And that's trying to catalog all the contact sheets. You see, at that time, there wasn't the possibility to just keep making prints. If you could make contact sheets, that was enough. That was a lot already. Sometimes you just processed the film and kept it. Sometimes you kept unprocessed film. So when I looked at this image, I thought, this actually has the seeds of everything I wanted to do later to make, you'll see. And so that's the first image. And this is about 1982, I think, or 81. And this is the second image I wanted to show you. This is Museum of Chance at the Hayward Gallery in 2013. And this is Museum Bhavan. at the Serendipity Festival in 2017. And I was thrilled to find this connection between the image that you see on my screen, Museum of Chance, and the book that came of it. And I thought, instead of going all over and doing the biographical kind of route, I would just take you through the museums and Museum Bhavan. And I think the essence of what I've tried to explore in my life with photography is in these two works. So I thought I would start in this same room where I'm doing the Zoom from. And this is how life was meant to be. This was meant to be the Mahal, because this was going to be the house of Museum Bhavan. My apartment was going to be Museum Bhavan. I had made these traveling museums and they were all going to come back, and this would be my house, and I could receive people. We could have seminars on this long table, or we could have drinking seminars or talking seminars, archivist in residence, apartment. And I guess today what I realized when I was looking through the work to make this is that maybe what I've always done with photography is to try and create a mahal for it. And mahal, unfortunately, is a very difficult word to explain. It could be mood, it could be the architecture of affect. But it's definitely architectural. It's the aura, but the aura is an outcome of that architecture. And I think that's what I've done my entire life, is to try to find a mahal for the images. So the first mahal, of course, for the images is a book, but we'll just come through that. So this is my godchild. Give it a different kind. So that was, I guess, sometime in 2013, while all the museums peopled this apartment. And that's what life was going to be, and life was for a while. And now I'll just take you through a quick tour of the Museum Bhavan, and then you'll know what I've been talking about all this time. Museum Bhavan is a traveling family of museums made by me. Each museum holds old and new images in movable wooden structures from the time I began photographing in 1981. So you saw that photograph, until the present. The museums can be opened and closed by the artist to create different shapes, spaces, and connections within and among them. You can see this presentation on Google Cultural Institute. And that's another story that would be nice to share at some point in this. I must remember to tell you that. So this is an exhibition I had at the Kiran Nadar Museum in 2016 called Conversation Chambers. And on the left, as the caption says, is File Museum. And on the right is the Museum of Little Ladies. In front of us is the Museum of Photography. And behind it, you see the Museum of Furniture. And Kochi Pillar at the end. And they're museums also because they have a reserve collection and reserve structures. And you can change the images very quickly. You see, this was a response to all those years of showing my work in museums and galleries where I couldn't rearrange the images. And Jenia, as a photographer, you would understand how the context of every images changes when, depending on what you put it next to. And I wouldn't be allowed to move my own images, let alone add new images. And so I found that really disappointing. And it's through all these challenges to me that I've sort of found these solutions. You know, it's not like I had an idea that this is what I'm going to do, but the form developed because of the problems I saw in the way photography was displayed in museums and galleries. And it wasn't enough for me. And
I'm sorry if I would like to interrupt you with a quick question. So your creation of the boxes was sort of solution to the same problem with the book, where the pages were bound in the, you know, in a certain way, in a certain direction. And
I'll come to the book.
Sorry?
I will come to the book.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's just, if it's a related question that I'll ask later. Then.
Yeah, please ask, please ask. It's a very important one, but I thought I'll give a little tour through the museums so people understand how my mind works and how that translates into the book. The images on reserve are often kept in boxes that may be taken out of the museum and displayed on the walls of the room in which the museum stand. So the only way that you could put my image on the wall, my images on the wall, was in one of these boxes. And I could open and close these museums in a second. I could change the architecture of the space. The girl on the bed assumes multiple forms in the Museum of Little Ladies. Its central panel is a chronological axis, a spine of time, formed by portraits of the artist made by her mother at key moments in her daughter's life. But I just want you to look at this image. This girl, this beautiful little girl. That's the girl who was just singing inside Museum Bhavan. And that's her a little older. And that's her older still, lying with her mother, my friend Nandita, inside the Museum of Little Ladies. Because in my house then, you know, there wasn't so much space. So the museums had to have the beds inside them. And the reason it's been shot like this is because it was my idea to ask Google to put this museum onto their cultural institute, because they had said that they could only do it for a museum. They couldn't do it for an individual. And I said, but I own this museum. I am the director, the registrar, the curator. I have a manifesto. I have trustees. I have seminars. Why am I not a museum? So they said, you have to be I think a registered museum. So when I showed the work at KNMA, I called them and I said, okay, so now I'm inside a museum. Can you come and bring the big camera so you can do the virtual tour inside the museum? And they said, you know, we can't, it's a big machine and it's out on loan right now. We can't bring it in for just this one exhibition. So I said, well, I'm a photographer. I can take the images myself, like your camera would have. And so that's what we've tried to do with my two colleagues, Umang and Simran. Simrat and Umang are my colleagues since a long time. And so we made this together. Simrat, in fact, put this whole Google, it was quite a production that she mastered, how to get the images into their format. So while I was showing the museum, Bhavan, at the Kiran Nadar Museum, I was also planning for its afterlife on the Google Cultural Institute. And so museums give birth to other museums, and Then there are sibling museums, there are cousin museums. The closeness of the two cousins, furniture and photography, creates here an outside of the broken visual planes as well as an inside plane. The latter turns into a kind of room that both beckons the viewer in and keeps them out in limbo between inside and outside. So there's wonderful commentary as well. And museums also give birth to other museums. The Museum of Furniture, for instance, produced the Museum of Vitrines, which hangs behind it on the wall. So this was literally while we were installing the exhibition at the Hayward that I said to the wonderful curator, Stephanie Rosenthal, that actually, I think Museum of Furniture has just given birth to a Museum of Vitrines. And she said, Dayanita, we can't add another museum at the last minute. And I said, sure, we can if we put the boxes as another museum. So that became Museum of Vitrines. And then often the museums had to have covers on them, either shrouds or like pajamas that would be opened when I thought the time was right. Museum of Photography was a very, very important museum for me because that, and I'm very happy that it's in the collection of the Met, because that's really a museum that talks about our relationship to photography and not photography as photographs that photographers make only. This is the Museum of Machines that also turned into a confession chamber where you had to take an appointment to come and confess. I don't think anybody really did that. People couldn't tell what was serious, what was not. And then sometimes the museums would be emptied and people would, you see the form of the museum gave the promise, like come back and you don't know what you'll see the next time and the next time. So it's not even, the museum also can't be static. The museum also has to be in motion, continuously changing. So this is the Museum of the Printing Press. And this is how Museum of Chance is my mother museum. And it came after all the other museums were made, where I followed more museum typological ideas, you know, file museum, little ladies, photography, but this was just Museum of Chance. And this became the mother museum that I said to my wonderful gallerist, Jane Hamlin, that she said, is it or is it not available? You know, we can't tell people something's available and it's not available. Because what had started to happen by this time, that the museums the bigger museums started to acquire my museums. So there was going to be nothing in my house. And I wanted there to be this Mahal of living inside the museums, you know. And so the house was going to be empty and I couldn't bear to let go of Museum of Chance. And so I said to Jane, really not to disappoint her, because I had no intention of ever, I said, you know, I would prefer it's only acquired after my death. Like this museum must stay with me because it's got all the seeds of my creativity in them. And she said, you have to be absolutely sure. So just like, you know, to be polite to her, I guess, I said, well, I suppose if it's a MoMA, then we could reconsider. And guess who called in about 2 months? And Jane promises me she had nothing to do with it. I don't know the true story. But like chance, the Museum of Modern Art did call. And so that is where Museum of Chance ended up, because when Lucy called and she said, well, is the Museum of Chance available or not? And I burst out laughing because I said, yes, it is available, but only if you're a MoMA. And I guess you are the MoMA. So that's what happened. But anyway, during the course of this exhibition, I kept inviting people to I invited the Delhi Wala, this wonderful, wonderful photographer, blogger. I invited him to give him the Archivist of the Year award. And then I invited Shane Zaveri if he would like to make a museum out of Museum of Chance. And so he made the Museum of Erotics. So that's what you see on the wall. That is the boxes that have come out of Museum of Chance. And gradually, as time went on, I started removing the images and putting them back into their storage, which is inbuilt in the museums. So finally, there were just the frames left. And it was even more beautiful for me because it had all the residue of all those images. And the images are inside, but you couldn't see them anymore. And so the museums, it was the skeleton of the museums, but their soul was still there. And then there were conferences and talks. I felt like I had to do the programming, you know, I even made my own bookshop there to sell my books from inside there, because what's a museum without a gift shop? They didn't let me put a coffee machine in because I think that would have been great. I did turn the museum into a photo book library and invited people to come and look at my photo books. So it was wonderful that the KNMA allowed me to sort of perform the museum, you know, that it wasn't just, it didn't fossilize in the museum. And that's what really bothers me about photography, how photography gets fossilized behind glass in a gallery or a museum or a home. And that's fine, but there can be other ways too. And so this is, I haven't seen it for years, but this was the manifesto of I can't remember. Somewhere here I've said that the Bhavan will be open to the public on the first and the second full moon of each year. At other times, it may be viewed by appointment only or through a large window that lets people look in without entering. So this is also there on the Google Cultural Institute. I just thought it would be very interesting to show you the manifesto and also the plan, because, you know, museums love plans. So this is how we showed it at the Hayward. And here's the Museum of Chance that you've been seeing a lot of. So that was amazing. And this was then at the Kiran Nadar Museum when the images had all been taken off. So then, once Museum of Chance left my house and went to MoMA, of course, I was delighted. Who wouldn't be? And especially if you've made a museum, which is sort of your critique of what a museum can be, because you love museums and you want them to be so much more, and especially with photography. And for that to go into the Museum of Modern Art, you know, it was fantastic. It was like a real high point of all the work that I've done. But then I got really depressed because my apartment looked so empty. I had got used to living with these museums, and Museum of Chance went to MoMA, I think in 2019. So I lived with Museum of Chance after it came back from the Hayward tour, but then it was gone. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do? And, you know, it's great when museums acquire your work, but we also know that there's no guarantee that they're going to show it. And there's no guarantee when they're going to show it, if they're going to show it. And I thought, will I even get to see it in my lifetime? And then I thought, but my friends aren't going to be able to see it. my mother can't go to New York to see it. If it's shown in New York, we didn't even know if it was going to be shown. And that's when I thought, I have to do something. I have to find a way to make the museum live on. And so I went to Gerhard Steidl and I said, can we make a miniature museum? Like Sent a Letter. And he said, we don't like to repeat things. We as him and me, we think of ourselves as, I don't know, co-conspirators or something. So I said, no, this is going to be Sent a Letter, had 7 accordion fold books. And this was going to have 9 for 9 of the museums. And I said, if we do it the same size, then people who have Sent a Letter have 7 exhibitions of my work. And with Museum Bhavan, they'll have 16 exhibitions of my work. And Gerhard loves that kind of thinking. So I think he said, okay, let's just go for it. And so we made this box. But then, of course, it's never just a box. And so I said to Gerhard, is it possible that I can make, once again, the box in India? And I want to make each box unique. And he said, no, of course not. How can you make each box unique? And I said, well, maybe I can. So can I at least try? And that's what I did with my lovely friend Tepa. Found this fantastic fabric called Achara, which is the undercloth of the print. Wow, that's so lovely. You should open your box.
Yeah, that's my personal copy. I have all the, so I do have your museum here in my house as well.
How lovely. How lovely. Did you ever have an opening for it?
No, but now that you give me that idea, I should. I definitely should. We have the space and the light here. Yeah.
If you can buy this box, which when it was available was 60 euros, then you can have an exhibition. If you happen to like my work, then you can have an exhibition of this work whenever you like, wherever you like. And that was the whole idea with this box. And then, of course, I had to make a suitcase for it to display it because I wanted to sell it myself. And so I took it around. And this is in my apartment. Then I had to try different formats for the suitcases. You see, there's just wheels within wheels within wheels. At one point, I couldn't bear living with so many images, so they were all covered in tissue paper, so I could faintly see the images, but I had to have them there. So I was quite bereft when the museums left. I mean, you can imagine, no? They were my companions for 5 years. So now the box is in my house and these miniature maquettes at the back. I don't know if you can see them. I'll show them to you later. So this is then my sort of thinking about what the forms for my suitcases can be. And this is a great story where I wrote to Orhan Pamuk because I loved his book, Museum of Innocence, to say if I could have a launch for the Museum Bhavan box in his museum in Istanbul, because I was going for the Istanbul Biennale. And he said, great, you can do that, but I won't be there, but my curator will do everything. And I'll send you a video message. So the books got stuck in customs, I suppose, like India. Turkey has this similar customs problems. So I gathered books from my friends in Venice and flew into Istanbul just about a few hours before this opening and rushed there, put a bench on top of the table and made my exhibition next to this wall of the cigarettes. And we had a big table with wine glasses, like 100 glasses of red wine, 100 glasses of white wine, beautiful nuts, beautifully. It was a great welcome. And then it was supposed to start at 6 o'clock, and 6 became 6:30, became 7, became 7:30. And I had posted on Instagram that I'm opening at this, at the Museum of Innocence in Istanbul. And by 8 o'clock, we realized nobody was coming. It was just the curator, his assistant, me, and my translator. And, I think there had been a miscommunication between the Biennale thinking the museum would do the inviting and the museum not wanting to overstep, thinking the Biennale would do the inviting. So it's a very interesting Instagram situation where everyone who saw it on Instagram thought I had this opening at the Museum of Innocence in Istanbul. And I had the opening because I put it on Instagram. I was there, but nobody came. And then I went to this wonderful bookshop in Berlin, the Bildband, I think that's how you pronounce it. And there they had just, with blue tack, put the books flat on the wall. Because at that time, the book was 60 euros. So even if you damaged one set, it would certainly help you sell another 100 sets. So they did a beautiful display for it. And then my wonderful friend Bilal had an opening in front of the Taj Mahal for his partner and made this wonderful photograph for me. And, that's really, you see now, Jenia, maybe that's what you were asking me before, how the museums, center letter was the start of the museums. So the museums became center letter on steroids. And then the museums became a miniature form in these museum Bhavan boxes. So it's all connected, and sometimes it's all too connected. But anyway, so this is in Agra. So Museum of Photography of Museum Bhavan has been shown at the Taj Mahal or in front of the Taj Mahal. So, that's great for the CV of Museum Bhavan, because I think books should also have CVs. And of course, then the Chobi Mela in Dhaka said they would like to do an exhibition. And, shipping is a huge problem, and especially in this part of the world, it makes it so much simpler if you can just ship a little box like this. And that's what I did. And they had sent a letter. So they showed all this, and guess who they had invited? Gerhard Steidl. And I don't know what Steidl is looking into in the book, but that's him looking at his own creation. And it wasn't like I got any big congratulations for him, from him, but
maybe he's smelling it.
He's smelling it. Yes. I mean, he's probably smelling it. And he told me when I met him, he lost a huge amount of money on this book, huge, because 3,000 boxes were made in India and shipped to Germany. So, but he's still very happy that he did it. And I was very happy to go back to the Satramdas jewelry store in Park Street in Calcutta, because this is where I had put center letter in 2008 in these vitrines. And I went back in 2018, they were still there. So center letter was shown for 10 years on Park Street. I mean, talk about having footfalls, This is like, I don't know, the equivalent in New York would be Fifth Avenue, I guess. So it gets that kind of traffic, and it's right there. My dream, of course, was to be on the footpath where all the posters are sold. But that's another story, and that didn't quite work out. I did try. I tried to be with those posters, but. And then at this wonderful gallery in Baroda, again, Museum Bhavan, and those are my boxes at the back, but we're not going to talk about the boxes so much today. So this box just had an amazing, I think my Museum Bhavan box, obviously has had more tours and more range of exhibitions than any other work of mine. This is in another dear friend's house, Channa's house in Colombo. Just because some people were coming, just put it out on the table. In fact, I think it was just for Channa, so the possibility of having a very private exhibition for one person is another aspect of this book box exhibition. I don't even know what to call it anymore. And because unfortunately this is Zoom, so I can't jump down from the stage and demonstrate the book opening to the people who were listening to the talk, because it's so exciting when you open the box and you do that. And then people are like, is it a book? Is it an exhibition? And that's what I wanted to say. I don't want to be a book on your bookshelf. And I don't want to be a print on the wall. I want that space in between. And this book object or the museums give me that possibility. So I'm actually seeking another space within or without photography, I don't know, but I think I'm getting there, you know. I think I'm going to see it in my lifetime, and maybe there will be a museum that will have a department for book objects if I have my way. So Museum Bhavan was shown, as you can see, in lots of places. But then I also made this jacket for myself with 9 pockets, because, you know, this should have actually been called Pocket Museum, because the idea is that you can travel with it. You know, you might want to, on a train or a plane, have an exhibition, right? So this is not my actual jacket, but it works. And so that jacket has these 9 pockets. And my friend Alma, who it turns out is having an exhibition right now in that space at the back that has my book objects on the wall, along with printed prints, fine art prints. So that makes me very happy. But this is what I was doing outside her gallery, pulling out the book and showing this exhibition to anyone who wanted to see it. So there's also an interesting conversation to be had about performing the book, that you make the book, but then you have to do a lot around it. You have to, we'll maybe come to that in the questions or not. And I'll end by showing you the Museum of Chance in the Museum of Modern Art with So that's it, Jenia. That's my life, 40 years. And I think one of the guiding principles has been this idea of creating the Mahal. And as I listened to this, I was thinking, why am I getting so moved? And it's the voice. And that's something I really miss in photography, the voice. And, you know, so that's.
Well, that was very beautiful. Thank you, Dayanita. But I was, you know, going back to the first question, and you said how you know, like photography was for you a way to be free. And it seems to me, after, you know, listening to this presentation, part of your mission is setting photography free in a way, you know, because you're trying to take it out of this 2-dimensional world that it's, you know, and I think the whole idea of the Mahal is when you have, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the word, but when you have all these other dimensions that are coming into your experience of photography, including the, you know, the voice and the.
Absolutely, Jenia. I mean, who am I to really think I can shift photography, because it's been so fixed by so many great men, some women, but the medium is so vast, you know. So in a way, it doesn't matter what photographers think of photography, or the photo world thinks of photography, or photo museums or photo festivals think of photography. Photography is much larger than all of that. We know that now very clearly. And I just think it has so many possibilities. And somehow when it comes to the gallery or the museum space, even the publishing space, it gets sort of quite rigid. And I don't know why, because, you know, it can be a book. It can also be an exhibition. It can also be a catalog. It can be in the Museum of Modern Art. It can be in your house. It can be so many things. And somehow the forms for photography, I feel, are too restricted. And I understand it's not really a curator's place to make that shift. At best, they can support it. And I must say, to my surprise, I have had tremendous support of my ideas, including on Instagram. You know, I'm using Instagram to put out these thoughts really that come to me every day because I'm looking through my archive, and so many things are becoming clear. Maybe for once in my life, I'm not traveling. I've been here for almost a year. And I'm getting wonderful responses from curators. But forms for photography can only come from photographers, no? Because if it comes from a designer or a publisher or a curator, it's not the photographers. So I'm hoping, and that's why it would be good to speak to students, and how do we find the right form for the work? And I believe that staying with the work really sort of shows you what it can be. You know, it comes down to really sitting with hundreds and hundreds of prints and just looking at them. And I still work like that. My studio upstairs is full of little prints that I'm struggling with. It never gets easy. You know, what do you want to be? Of course I can make a book, and of course I can make an exhibition, but God knows that's not enough. It's just not enough for me. And I'm hoping there are young people, and I see signs of it in this region, interestingly. I see very good signs of it. And there's this terrific exhibition in Dubai at the Ishara Foundation, curated by Saurabh Hura. That gives me a lot of hope. And, you know, printed matter, because it's online, is going to have a bookshop from India. Offset Projects is going to be showing books from the region. So look out for that, and you'll see how there's a certain tactility coming to the books here. There's a certain shift in the form. And so maybe my dream that museums will have a department of book objects, like they have photography and everything else, is not so far removed. It might happen.
Yeah, that's what I've been dying to ask you, is because I know how tactility is important to you, you know, both in your process and the things that you make. And, you know, we're talking a little bit before about the future of photography, you know, and of course we have to talk about the digital aspect of it. So where does that connection break, or, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
For the longest time, I resisted digital because I loved making silver gelatine prints. But I have to say, it's when I was forced to go make digital prints that I started to that I could even dare to dream of making the museums. You know, Museum Bhavan in total has some 900 images. It would take me probably a lifetime and a lifetime's earnings to make 900 silver prints. So digital has allowed me to really think out of the box, and has shifted my thinking a lot as well, because while I made silver prints, that was the original. And I understood that the book was the reproduction. And then, you know, people sort of fetishized the print. But now we have the same scan that makes the book, that makes the projection, that is shown on Zoom, maybe just a little lower res, that makes the print on the wall. So I think, for one, in this rush from analog to digital, I don't think we stop to think about what it does to editions in photography. And we may not want to go there because it's such a specific subject. But while I love the possibilities of Instagram, it does sort of oversimplify the image. I don't think Instagram is the place for the complexity of the image. I prefer to use Instagram for posting my messages about the image. But I think talking about the future, regardless of whether it's analog or digital. To me, the photographer of the future, as I've been saying on Instagram, is the archivist, this person that is going to keep documenting, photographing, whatever you want to call it, year after year, decade after decade, maybe 5 decades, maybe 6 decades if you start early enough. Because what you're doing is you are gathering time. And the same Ohana that you saw singing, I have been photographing since she was 2. And she's now doing a PhD connected to music. And I met her through her grandmother, Krishna, through music. So because I haven't moved very far, I have somehow circled around the same places, the same people for 40 years. It doesn't matter whether the photographs are good or not, or blurred or scratched or grainy, or it doesn't matter. What matters is that there is this incredible archive. And, you know, you asked me that question in the beginning and I wasn't quite sure how to answer it, about what was the moment. The moment for photography perhaps was the night that I described when I sat with my friends on whether to be a photographer or not. But that moment that things really shifted for me was a comment from my amazing mother. I mean, those of you who follow me on Instagram will know what a character she is. Really, like Mona, a unique character, has her own way of thinking about things. And in the early 90s, when I started to do the family portraits, and nobody was interested in my work, and some families were and some families weren't, and but that was my dream, that at the end of my life, if my family portraits are hanging in 300 homes in the world, in the country, I couldn't think of the world, that's enough. That'll be my exhibition. But nobody was interested in my work because I wasn't doing what was expected at that time from this part of the world. And my mother, it was amazing. She said, you know, really don't bother about that. Somehow just keep doing these portraits, photographing those empty spaces, because someday some historian will study your work to study the flooring. And that's it. That was my big moment. Just that, you know, small comment from her that, yes, okay, so today my colleagues don't think much of my work, the curators, you know, I didn't even dare dream of curators at that time, talking about the 90s. But I thought someday there'll be someone who'll want to look at this work, as long as I can leave it in a form where it's accessible, as long as I can make books. You know, somehow these books will remain. And the exhibitions will come and go, and I can have retrospectives and big exhibitions at fantastic museums. That's all great. But what will finally remain is the book. So now that I have looked through my archive of 4 decades, I actually feel I have to stop photographing, because I will burn the candle at both ends. You see, the first 20 years of my work has hardly been seen even by me, let alone anybody else, because it was a different time. You couldn't just randomly make prints. You made prints because you were making a book on Zakir or a book on Mona, or you had an assignment, which was a very brief period for me. So what could I, you know, there's just so much work there. So now if I start making more images, I just at one point drop dead. No, that's what happens to photographers. You photograph till you drop dead. But then I'm leaving the great part of my work, which is the culling, the editing, the sequencing, the finding the form, to somebody else, if someone is interested in my work, or nobody does anything with it and it just deteriorates and disintegrates. So I want to actually, now that I've done the stage 4 decades. Some Instagram I wrote about the 4 stages. I'm getting a little confused with that now. But now that I've done the 4 decades of the tapasya of gathering this raw material of images, this is the work. this 4 decades work, whether it's in the form of contact sheets like you saw, or it's digital, that is the work. The books and the exhibitions were little commas. So this is what I'm proposing to, if there are some younger photographers listening and if they get excited with the idea, that just keep photographing around those same, and obviously if you found something that really interests you, chances are you're not going to leave it, that you will keep going back again and again, whether it's a place or a person or a feeling, that it just grows and grows. So now I have to make that terrible decision that I may not photograph now because I have so much work to do. And I hope I live for another 2 decades so I can complete all that work. So I can leave these books for the future historian to study the flooring in my photographs.